Everyone, we're super excited to have you all with us today for another Decision Lens webinar. Today we'll be discussing Fast Act legislation and how you can structure data and set quantifiable performance targets for Fast Act with Decision Lens. So let's jump right into our agenda. So we'll do some introductions, and by that I mean I'll just introduce Naquan. We'll give a brief history on Decision Lens and overview. We'll look at our customers in the space on the transportation and transit space. We'll look at the MAP 21 overview and the current challenges faced by DOTs. We'll do MAP 21 and Decision Lens and how we are able to help with that. We'll do a bit of a questions check-in. Naquan will show you an interactive demo of our solution and some other features, and then we'll end with some additional questions for the floor. So let me introduce Naquan. Naquan's been with Decision Lens for about 3.5 years. He's our Director of Solutions Engineering. He works, extensively with our transportation group and clients, really just helping them with a ton of stuff, including the Fast Act, and he's definitely an expert in the field. So we're really excited to have him walk through a bit of, again, what Decision Lens does, what we're doing with Fast Act and MAP 21, as well as show you a little bit of the software. So Naquan, the floor is yours, sir.
Thanks so much for that lovely introduction, Adam. I want to start off with giving you all an overview of who Decision Lens is and what we do. We are a SaaS-based software platform that enables you to create a solution that is data-driven for true cross-asset performance-based planning and programming, and we're used by many state DOTs. We've allocated over $500 billion in investment since our founding in 2002. We prioritize over 250,000 projects. We have an over 90% renewal rate and a 50% growth rate. Some of the states that use Decision Lens are highlighted on the slide here that you see. We have the state of Texas, Arizona, Arkansas, Delaware, Kentucky, Minnesota, Mississippi, Nevada, Oklahoma, Pennsylvania, and I definitely don't want to leave out our mass transit counterparts. Decision Lens has many uses. We have mass transit agencies such as BART out in San Francisco that uses us as well, the FRA, and also New Jersey Transit. So let's really talk about why we're all here. We know that there's legislation that's come out that requires states to start to set performance targets and show how they're investing in their system to meet those performance targets in time. So what Decision Lens enables state DOTs to do is to capture data that already exists across perhaps siloed systems. So taking that information from your asset management systems that support your bridges, your pavement, your safety programs, your CMAQ programs, your other programs that are in critical parts of your system, and we have a software platform with genetic algorithms and other high-level algorithms that are steeped in decision sciences that helps the organizations optimize their investment strategies to meet the performance targets that are set by the state. So this is just a basic overview of things that most of you already know about the current state of DOTs. Currently in transportation, information and performance evaluation is mostly done in silos at the asset class level. If we leverage the data that's coming from these silos and integrate it together, DOTs can gain more efficiency in how they spend their money and in adhering to the MAP 21 requirements by moving toward that integrated performance-based approach. The current state of capital planning processes. First and foremost, we know that we have MAP 21 and FAST. It's requiring states to evaluate the benefits of projects across performance goals and measures. Prioritization is occurring within these divisions. As we mentioned earlier, there's various asset management systems. There's bridge and pavement asset management systems. Often these systems don't talk to each other, and often there's not an effective bridge to connect these silos of groups to share information to show the true cumulative benefit of doing a project or investing in a project to the system. So prioritization is occurring in these divisions. It's typically a manual process that's very, very spreadsheet heavy, non-quantitative, and risk sub-optimizing, which leads to financial resources, limiting the financial resources that could be used toward achieving goals. Current challenges. There's a lot going on. There's many moving parts that are impacting departments of transportation and mass transit agencies. First and foremost, at the very top, we have these federal mandates for measures and performance reporting. Then we have states that have their own performance goals that sometimes don't line up one-to-one with the federal requirements. And then we have MPOs that have subjective measures that don't line up with what the state requirements are for getting those federal funds. So we have multiple perspectives that are happening in a dynamic system. And a lot of times these perspectives are clashing in this model of making decisions that impact the system in one state. So there's a breakdown between the federal and the state, and there's also a breakdown between the state and the MPOs often. Some of the organizational challenges that, that we've seen since doing this since 2002 is organizations are having extreme difficulty in articulating the true value of projects at the local and state level. There's multiple systems, as we mentioned before. A lot of these prioritizations are done at the silo class level. There's lack of alternative or backup plans should the scope of a project differ from what it was forecast to be. There's difficulty in weighing the trade-offs. How do I weigh the trade-offs between, for example, a mobility project versus doing a pavement project versus that bridge project? And scalability is a huge issue. Looking across organizations to maximize return on investment in terms of achieving performance goals requires a dynamic and scalable system. And finally, transparency and the ability to communicate back to key stakeholders across divisions can be difficult. Once you've made a decision, based on sound data and a rigorous analytic process, you really need a clear way to create a narrative, to tell that story behind the data, to show the impacts of what those decisions are going to have on your system. So Decision Lens brings all of these moving parts together. It's going to enable departments of transportation to find balance across statewide, regional, and local needs. We enable standardization. So you can implement a performance-based decision framework across all of those levels, at the MPO level, at the silo, bridge, pavement, asset level, and also at the state level. We enable collaboration. We enable share of voice across all of these levels, across all of these competing priorities, to bring it together into a holistic system to give you visual analytics that are going to enable you to make better decision making. We enable you to set targets and to visualize how investment strategies are tracking towards achieving those targets or not. And finally, Decision Lens is a very dynamic and adaptable system. You're going to see that when we move into the demo portion of this presentation, and it enables true coordination between the states and the MPO stakeholders, and even stakeholders that maybe include public officials and also the civilian public at large. Finally, this is a scalable system that can be used at the MPO level to scale up to the state level to finally scale up to true reporting at the federal level. So I'm going to give a very high-level overview of MAP 21. All of you are extremely familiar with it, so I'm not going to spend too much time on this. But we do know that federal surface transportation legislation, beginning with MAP 21 and then continuing with the Fast Act, has established performance requirements for states and MPOs. The requirements include gathering data for national performance measures, performance target setting at the state and MPO level, and coordination between the states and MPOs to make sure that the impacts at each level are tracking toward meeting those overall targets that are set for the state at large. And finally, you have to report on performance at regular intervals, and you need a really easy, seamless way to gather all of this data from disparate data sets, to gather information and competing objectives from multiple stakeholders to report on what's really happening across your system. There are really three categories of performance measures that were outlined in this federal rulemaking, PMs 1 through 3, which include safety, system performance, and system preservation. At a very high level, we're just going to review what they are. The performance measures under safety include reporting out on a number of fatalities, number of serious injuries, fatalities per 100 million VMT, serious injuries per 100 million VMT, and non-motorized fatalities and serious injuries. Moving on to PM2, we have our preservation. We have reporting out on the percent of deck area for bridges on the NHS that's in good condition, and also the percent of deck area on the NHS in poor condition. For pavement, we're looking at percent of pavement on interstate in good condition, percent of pavement on non-interstate in HS in good condition, percent of pavement on interstate in poor condition, and also the percent of pavement on non-interstate in HS in poor condition. Finally, system performance, freight movement, and air quality. In our experience, we found that this category is usually the most cumbersome for states to gather data for and adhere to, but really it's looking at the percent of person miles traveled on the interstate system that are reliable, the percent of person miles traveled on a non-interstate NHS that are reliable, percentage of interstate system mileage providing for reliable truck travel times, annual hours of peak hour excessive delay per capita, and percent of non-SOV travel. So let's bring this all together and talk a little bit more about DecisionLens. We are industry-leading software. We're used by over 12 departments of transportation in the United States. I know we also have some participants on that are international. And we enable cross-asset performance-based planning and programming. And how we do that is by leveraging data across different systems. We leverage data coming from your asset management systems for bridge, pavement. We leverage that safety, mobility data, the environment data, the economic data. We're able to bring in both objective and subjective data points and meld them together to create a true prioritization dashboard of a set of projects across all asset classes that shows the cumulative benefit that a project is going to give to the system if you invested your limited resources into it. Finally, we enable you to push those investment strategies into an impact dashboard to show the performance of that particular investment strategy across a number of predefined measures that a DOT is going to choose that adheres to their analytical needs. DecisionLens enables you to capture the true value of projects. You can capture highway economic requirements. You can capture information from the National Bridge Investment Analysis System and statewide performance information. And like I said before, we're leveraging the cumulative impact of a project across all asset classes and all critical evaluation factors that you're looking at to assess the performance of your system, and we're pushing that to an impact dashboard to see how those strategies are enabling you to track toward the targets that you set as required by MAP 21 and the Fast Act. I keep talking about leveraging data. DecisionLens has open APIs. They're RESTful, they're secure RESTful APIs. They're documented, and they enable us to create bidirectional feeds in and out of any of your systems to pull in the relevant information that we need that supports objective criteria. We also have a distributable surveying tool within our system that enables us to capture subjective data points from key stakeholders at different levels of decision-making within the system. So if anyone has questions about that, there will be an opportunity to ask questions about data connectors and how we get that data in, et cetera. We also support single sign-on. We're FedRAMP certified, so we're an extremely secure system. I mentioned before that we are SaaS-based, so that means that we're in the cloud. If you do require on-premise options, we have that option as well. And we integrate with most GIS systems. I'm going to give an example of how we can push data into Esri. I just happen to use Esri. I'm not promoting or suggesting you guys use Esri, but I just wanted to give an example to show that the analysis in DecisionLens is flexible enough to be pulled out for uses in other systems and for use with other analytic tools to help with your decision making. We also partner with some of the best consultants in the industry, such as High Street. And I want to take a pause right there. You guys have gotten a little background of who we are, what we do, why we're here, why are we here. I want to open it up now for any initial questions anyone online might have before we move into a live demo of the software.
Naquan, we did have one come through on the chat that I think is fitting for now before you get into the software. Is the solution that we provide more for the STIP or LRTP, excuse me?
That's a great question. It's for both. And you catered our solution for both scenarios by changing the evaluation criteria and the time horizon that you're looking at. The example that I'm going to use during our live demo is going to be geared toward a STIP. However, all the criteria, and I'll go into what a criterion is and what those definitions mean in our demo, are configurable and customizable. You guys are going to put in what's important for your state, including what's mandatory to meet the Fast Act and MAP 21 requirements. But yes, decision can be leveraged in both situations.
Great, thank you. Yeah.
Okay, great. We're going to move into a live demonstration of the software. Just give me a second to transition. Okay. Like I mentioned before, the example that I'm going to use is for STIP. And really, this is the result of the first half of decision lens, which is strategic prioritization. You can think of decision lens can be broken up into really two components. The first half is cross-asset performance-based planning and programming via strategic prioritization. And the second half is looking at your different colors of money, the resources that you have, and using our artificial intelligence via our genetic algorithms to optimize those funds across the portfolio in an ideal way that's going to enable you to actually meet your targets. So this is the result of strategic prioritization, where I have a set of objectives, or my priorities are here to the left. My priorities are safety, preservation, system performance, freight movement, congestion, air quality, and system criticality. Notice that each of these priorities have a relative weight of importance in its prioritization model. So you can see that this particular state is heavily focused on safety. This represents 20% of their prioritization strategy. If you add up all of these percentages, they're going to all equal 100%. One final thing to notice about looking at our goals and our measures here to the left is that they're all color-coded. And that's going to be important in a second when I describe how we use these objectives and goals for a state to prioritize projects. The set of projects in this particular model are to the right. So these are a set of projects across safety, bridge, pavement. They're on critical parts of the system. They're projects that are going to relieve congestion, improve the air quality. And what we're doing is we're assessing the alignment of each one of these projects across all of these goals and measures to the left. That assessment is going to yield a value score, like you see here. And this value score represents the cumulative benefit that that project is giving to the system across all of these measures of importance. If you look to the right of this value score, you can see that there's a value bar that's color-coded. And that's where these color codes to the left come into play. I can see that I can drill into how well this project is giving benefit to any one of those goals and measures. So this blue portion is safety. I can see that this project gives me a very small safety benefit. It gives the most benefits regarding preservation. That's the green portion of this bar. So Decision Lens enables you to drill in to individual benefit of a goal or measure, or drill out to get a holistic view of the cumulative benefit across all goals and measures. So if I added up the score or the benefit that the project is giving to each of these individual color-coded components, that's going to give me the value score, which represents the cumulative benefit. So I wanted to start with the end in mind, but we're going to take it a step back. I'm going to start from the beginning, and we're going to go through an end-to-end prioritization and resource optimization process that's going to enable us to see how a particular investment strategy enables performance target achievement. It all starts with bringing in a set of goals and measures. So this organization at the high level is concerned with these goals and measures. We already went over them. But these goals and measures also have children. This is a hierarchy that further define them. So safety is defined by number of fatalities per 100 million VMT. And these are familiar because these are the components of the reporting requirements of MAP 21 and FAST. Under preservation, we want to make sure that we're keeping our assets in a good state of repair. So for bridge, I have a grandchild criterion. If I put money into this particular bridge project, what will be the reduction in poor deck area? So a project that gives me more reduction in poor deck area would get a higher score than a project that didn't give me as much reduction. So really, we're building in our goals and our measures, and this is going to differ from state to state. There are going to be similar components because there's consistent components across all states in the United States for reporting and adhering to MAP 21. But what's nice about this is that you have the flexibility to add new criteria that are specific to your state, or if this were a prioritization at the MPO level specific to the particular MPO. So really, the name of the game is creating a value model. Once we've architected our value model, we are going to take you through a process to derive the relative weights of importance of each one of these drivers in this value model. So with decision what's driving that derivation of weights of importance is the analytic hierarchy process. So Decision Lens is a software that has many high-level decision science processes built into it, and the analytic hierarchy process enables you to take a complex criteria set like this and reduce it into a logical judgment state. And what I mean by that is this. I'm taking this complex criteria set and I'm forcing a stakeholder to evaluate it in a pairwise fashion. So what Decision Lens has built in is a distributable surveying system. So I'm going to set up a group of stakeholders, usually leaders in a DOT, that are going to evaluate the relative importance of each one of these drivers. They'll receive a survey via email. They'll click on a link that takes them to a user interface that looks like this. So notice that I'm evaluating that criteria set one peer at a time. So with regard to the portfolio goal, which in this case is to prioritize projects and optimize a capital asset program and evaluate trade-offs, which one of these drivers are more important to me as a leader? Is it safety or is it preservation? And my answer to this question could be different from a different leader, and that's totally okay. But the idea is we want to capture value judgments from different leaders in the organization to really drive what's important for the organization as a whole. So in this case, this leader thinks that safety is more important than preservation. They cast their vote on a scale here at the bottom. So they strongly believe that safety should be weighed heavier than preservation in this prioritization process. Strong corresponds to a factor of 5. So what they're saying is that in this prioritization scheme, safety is 5 times more important than preservation, and prioritizing these projects across all asset classes. So if I were really going through this as a leader, I would click next. I would continue to go through that process until I've exhausted all of the possible pairs that are in this hierarchical criteria set. So that's essentially how we got to those relative weights of importance that we saw on the first screen here. The next step is to create a scoring matrix. I want to be able to open a scoring matrix up to the organization at large, to the siloed asset departments. I want to be able to have the bridge program weigh in on how well their set of bridge projects aligns to the goals and measures established by leadership. So I'm going to create a scoring matrix. For each one of the criteria, for each criterion, I'm creating a scoring matrix, and notice I can create a scoring matrix that's objective, and I can also create scoring matrices that are subjective. So for example, the number of fatalities is objective. It is what it is based on historical data. If I put money into a project and it reduces the number of fatalities by 6, I'm going to give that project the highest score in the scale, which is 1. If it doesn't reduce any fatalities, it's going to get a score of 0. So this is a linear scoring matrix, but it could be logarithmic, it could be exponential, depending on how you map your rating to your value. An example of a subjective scoring scale would be, for example, what is the impact on economic development plans? If I put money into this project Is it going to have a strong positive impact, moderate, minimal, neutral, no impact, or a negative impact on the economic development plans in a particular region or a particular district? Really what's nice about this is that the organization is going to set up these scales and configure them such that it makes sense to their analysis. You can change what these rating names are such that it's in the vernacular of your organization and it makes sense to people that are going in and giving their informed value judgments as to how well their project aligns to what's important by leadership. But really what we want to do is architect a value model. So we've done that. We have a set of criteria that's been defined by leadership. We have the relative weights of importance of each one of these drivers. We have a way to evaluate how well potential investments across all asset classes align to these drivers through these rating scales. Now we need to get ratings for these projects. So the next step is to have each one of the divisions, maybe you have bridge, pavement, the safety group, go in and start to rate their projects against the criteria using these rating scales. And the way we capture that information is through another distributable survey that looks like this. So notice that this survey includes a project. So I've been assigned to evaluate this, this lane adding, this add lane capacity project. And I'm evaluating against each one of those drivers set by leadership using those rating scales. How is this project on a highway network? Yes, it is. It's on the NHS interstate. Freight network, it's on a primary network. So I'm literally going in and I'm casting my votes based on those rating scales that were in place. This is only for subjective information or binary yes/no categorical information. If you have more objective information, like what is pavement, let's say by PCI or IRI, that data is what it is based on a forecast or based on a model. We would tap into whatever data source is holding that data and literally bring it in to inform that criterion. So for subjective data points, we have a survey that stakeholders can fill out so that we can capture their value judgments as to how well a project aligns to what's important to leadership. So having said all of that, that is what's driving the creation of this prioritization dashboard here. So we have our sets of projects that have a score, which represents how well each project scored against each criteria here to the left using those rating scales, and then we're multiplying that score by the relative weight of importance of each one of those drivers. So now we have an informed model with information, and you can do a lot of high-level analysis from here. The first level of analysis is truly just drilling in and out of categorical and metadata. So I have a few categorical data points in here. I have the district that the project belongs to, the division, is it on the freight network, the highway network, the MPO that it belongs to, and the strategic goal that it may align to. And this really just enables you to slice and dice this portfolio. So if I wanted to look at all of the projects coming from MPO A, I could drill in there. These are the projects coming from MPO A. Here's their relative value to one another and how they align to each of the individual components of this value model. So there's a lot of very creative and constructive analytic approaches you could take to analyzing a portfolio by the way you design what we call alternative categories or filterable metadata in looking at your prioritized list of projects. Okay, so this really is step one. We want to create a value model for prioritization. We've done that. Now we want to use this prioritization dashboard to help us spend our money in the most effective way. So the second half of Decision Lens is optimizing resources. I'm going to move there now. And in our resource optimizer, what you are enabled to do is build an investment strategies and see how those investment strategies enable the achievement of the targets that you set. So in this example, here at the top, this is my budget. I have different colors of money. I have budget for my bridge program, pavement, safety, congestion, and I also have a regional discretionary fund. This is a 4-year STIP. Someone asked a question about STIP versus LRTP. If I were looking at an LRTP, I would extend the time horizon And of course, the questions that I'm asking to evaluate potential projects would be different. But Decision Lens enables the flexibility to look at both types of situations. So you can see that I have $16.5 million in the bridge program over 4 years. This is how much I have in each time period, 19 through 2022. At the bottom are my projects across all asset classes. And what I'm going to do is I want to tell the software what the resourcing requirements are for the project. For example, this Interstate 76 at-lane capacity project is asking for $24 million over a 2-year period. It's a project that begins in 2019 and ends at the end of 2020, but it can only pull that money from 2 budget line items or 2 colors of money. It can only pull from the pavement program and the congestion program, and this is how much it's asking for each color from each color of money. So you're going to bring that data into our system for each and every one of your projects, and this is where our integration capabilities come into play. You can easily upload this information via flat files or spreadsheets, or we can directly connect to any systems that are housing this information to bring it in and push it back out. So really, what I'm concerned with is, I'm concerned with the fact that I have $105 million to spend across all colors of money, but this portfolio is asking for $142 million. Clearly, I'm going to have to make some smart trade-offs. Before I make those trade-offs, some of these projects are dependent on one another. They're project interdependencies. So I can build in dependencies in Decision Lens. For example, if I have phased projects, phase 2 can't be funded or be executed until phase 1 occurs. I can build in that sequence. I can build in a time period dependency. If I do project A, 3 months later I must do project B. I can build in parallel value dependencies. It makes sense for me to do project A and B together or not at all in order to get the true value from it. I can build in mutual exclusivity. There's 5 ways to do the same thing. I can build all 5 scenarios into Decision Lens and have Decision Lens pick the best scenario in light of all of the other financial and scheduling constraints that exist within your investment model. So Decision Lens is going to take in any rules that you build in for dependencies, and the first thing it's going to do is what we call a bottleneck analysis. So a bottleneck analysis is just looking at your current state. It's looking at your different colors of money, what you have, and all of the projects that are demanding resources, and it's going to give you a snapshot of where your bottlenecks lie. For example, I can see that I'm bottlenecked across all colors of money here. I'm $3 million short of getting everything done that's asking for funds from the bridge program in 2019. Overall, I'm $36 million short of getting everything done across all colors of money. Notice here at the bottom, these are my projects, and I have my project demand here, the amount of dollars that are being demanded and where those dollars are being demanded from. But in addition, I have a projected schedule, and Decision Lens is going to illustrate those projected schedules in Gantt bar view. So I can see that, once again, this Interstate 76 at-lane capacity project is a 2-year project beginning in 2019 and ending in 2020. So what I want to do is I want to get the best use of the resources that I do have in light of these constraints and also in light of any other project interdependencies that exist. So I'm going to ask Decision Lens for a baseline funding recommendation based on how each one of these projects were valued in the prioritization process and also in light of the constraints that I have. So I'm going to execute our optimization algorithm by clicking Suggest Schedule. And when I do that, Decision Lens is looking at a number of different factors that I'll go into in a second to give you a suggestion. And that suggestion is, do not fund this project here, where my arrow is, but fund everything that has a highlighted Gantt bar in blue. There's a few projects here that are not being recommended for funding, like this one that's crossed out, and this one, and this one. And it's saying, even though you were millions of dollars short of funding everything, in fact, you were $36 million short of funding everything, you can still get about 75% of the strategic value from this portfolio based on how each one of those projects were rated against the goals and objectives set by leadership. If I take this one step further, it will help us explain exactly what the optimizer is doing in the background. So the view that you're looking at right now is, this is the same prioritization dashboard we saw before with all of the multicolored bars. So these light blue bars represent the cumulative benefit that the project is giving to the system. On the x-axis at the bottom are all of the projects across all asset classes. So now we're just beginning to consider cost. And when I start to consider cost, I get a new picture or a new narrative of what's happening in this portfolio of investments. The picture that I get is that my third most strategically aligned project is also the most expensive. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. But these are things that need to be considered when making a strategic investment decision that's going to help an organization achieve their targets. So the first thing the optimizer is going to do is it looks at the ratio of cumulative benefit to cost, so the ratio of light blue to dark blue bars. And it's wanting to drive an organization towards projects that have a very high benefit to cost ratio, like this one here. You can see that you're getting a ton of benefit at a very, very, very small cost. The next thing the optimizer is doing is it's trying to maximize collective value while minimizing collective costs in light of all of the constraints you have with budget and also project interdependencies. A recommendation based on those factors. So here you can see the recommendation is to fund all projects that have an orange circle. So fund these. Don't fund the ones that are in white. So skip the third most valuable project, skip these, and you can get about 75% of the value from the portfolio. In addition, we were talking a lot about, we've been talking this whole time about creating value models, strategic using that prioritization to help us spend our money most effectively. But now let's tie it back into the targets that you set and answering the question, will this investment strategy enable target achievement? So what I can do is push this investment strategy or this recommendation to a dashboard that looks similar to this. In this dashboard, I have the different components of my budget. I have my bridge component, pavement, CMAC, and HSIP. But more importantly, I have a set of measures that I'm concerned with looking at. I am looking at the percent of structurally deficient deck area that particular investment strategy is enabling me to achieve. And what this is telling me is that at baseline, before I started to prioritize and optimize, I had 5.53% of my deck area in a structurally deficient state. However, that particular investment strategy that we just looked at will enable reduction from 5.53 to 1.99. Same thing goes for the other targets that are on this particular dashboard. And this dashboard is configurable. You can configure this to have your MAP 21 and Fast Act targets, and actually observe how an investment strategy is enabling tracking towards reaching those targets or not tracking towards reaching those targets. But this particular dashboard is concerned with targets regarding deficient deck area, poor lane miles, vehicle hours of annual delay savings, and very importantly, the reduction in fatal and serious injury crashes per year and a reduction in total crashes. So as another example, you can see that at baseline, this system had 13 fatal and serious injury crashes. However, the investment strategy that was recommended by DecisionLens enables reduction from 13 to 7.98. Integrating with GIS systems. I mentioned that DecisionLens, we have open APIs. We actually do have integration with GIS, including Esri. I could push this particular investment strategy also onto a map if I really wanted to get a view of what was happening. And for any of my GS folks on the line, what this map is a swipe map that shows my before and after. The before scenario is what you're looking at now, where anything in red are segments that were in poor condition, anything in yellow is fair, anything in green is good condition. Now imagine using DecisionLens to strategically prioritize assets across all asset classes and using that data and information to optimize the resources or the investment spend that you're going to put into the system, well, I can now see what the impact is going to be after using Decision Lens, for example. So this is the after scenario. Notice that a lot of that red, a lot of the segments in poor condition were brought up to good condition. That's the green that you see here. But I didn't have enough money to get everything done, so there's still going to be portions of red in the system. And there's a portion of segments in the system that actually move from poor to fair. That's these yellow segments that you see here. So in a nutshell, this is a very flexible system that really enables you to do what you're doing now, but leverage the data and bring the data together in a collaborative way to see the overall impact across all aspects of the system, to push those impacts onto a performance dashboard, and also to communicate with the public or other key stakeholders via a GIS mapping system. We're going to go back into our decision model again so that I can show you just a few other pieces of functionality that are available here. We talked a lot about the system giving you a recommended funding strategy. That's just a recommendation. Decision Lens enables better decisions. It is not a black box that makes decisions for anyone. You, as a very highly skilled and experienced engineer or planner or other key stakeholder in your organization, may look at this and say, you know what, this is great, but we have political pressure to fund this project here to the far right that Decision Lens didn't recommend. Well, that's okay. You can use the baseline funding suggestion as a baseline to build on. So what you can do is turn projects on and off based on changes in your operating environment, changes in your political environment, changes in stakeholders' attitudes towards funding a project or not funding a project. So I'm going to give you an example where I'm going to force on one of these projects. So I'm going to force on this State Route 60 project. And I want to see how that impacts my system. The first thing I can see is that it had a very small impact on the overall strategic value I can pull from this portfolio. Initially at baseline, we were at 75%. Now we're at 74%. More importantly, a lot of times planners want to understand what are the implications of investing, of going with one investment strategy versus another. And Decision Lens enables you to compare multiple investment strategies. So you could have 10 different investment strategies that you're building in to say, what if we spent our money this way? Or what if we spent our money that way? What would be the overall impact to the system? So here I'm looking at two investment strategies side by side. Investment strategy A is where I was pulling out 75% of the value versus where I maybe had political pressure to force fund a project, decrease my value, overall strategic value, to 74%. I could also look at equity. In investment strategy 1, these are my districts here. In investment strategy 1, I'm putting 28% of the budget into district 7. In investment strategy 2, I'm putting 30% of the budget into district 7. There's a lot of ways you can slice and dice this using our analytic visualizations here. And it really, it depends on how you structure the portfolio with those categorical data points that are metadata that are giving us more information to drill in. So I could also look at this by MPO. Strategy A, I'm putting 19% of the budget into non-MPO. And I'm putting 25% of the budget into non-MPO in strategy B. But really, more importantly, planners want to understand, if I do one project, what can't I do as a result? And Decision Lens does a really good job at highlighting that and enabling organizations to communicate that type of information to key stakeholders. And that's what we're looking at here. This is investment strategy A, where I'm doing this Interstate 80 corridor reconstruction project. Remember, in investment strategy B, I have political pressure to force fund the State Route 60 project. Well, as a result of doing that, I can no longer do the Interstate 80 corridor reconstruction project. Now, this is a pretty small model, but imagine if we had thousands of projects in here. You could easily see what falls on and off the table between different investment strategies. and choose the best investment strategy that's going to work for meeting the objectives of your MPO, your district, or your state. Finally, there's two more pieces of functionality I'd like to go through, and then I'll open it up to the group for any specific questions that you might have. We have executive readouts that are really nice and specific here. So for any one of those investment strategies that you've built in, you can actually push it to a dashboard that looks like this, where I'm looking at this investment strategy where I had that political pressure to force fund that very high cost, low value project. Well, by doing that, these are the projects that I'm funding. And notice that I can break them up by MPO, so I can see which MPOs they belong to, I can see which districts they belong to, how much money I'm spending in each MPO, 19.8 in MPO A versus 14.7 in MPO B. I can see the total amount of spend, and more importantly, I can see what's not going to get funded and why, and which district is impacted and which MPO is impacted. There's a number of different ways that I could set this up. Remember, I had those filterable categories in here. If I only want to look at the mobility projects by MPO and district, well, here they are. Mobility and safety. There's a lot of different ways that you can slice and dice this to communicate data to key stakeholders. At the end of the day, infrastructure is what's really driving our country to meet our most specific objectives, and all of you are really the beacons of light for making sure that our infrastructure is intact so that we can move forward as a country. And when you're setting targets and using funds from across different pools of money, it's really important to understand what the impacts of those investment strategies are going to be. With that, I am going to end the demo portion of this presentation, and I'll turn it over to any questions that may have come in.
Yeah, Naquan, so we did have a couple of questions here. So one listener said they don't currently do cross-asset prioritization. Are they able to benefit from the software?
Absolutely. The benefit of DecisionLens is even if you're not doing cross-asset prioritization, you can still prioritize within your individual asset classes, and we can tap into that data and bring it into a cross-asset view. What I mean by that is this: if you're looking at the prioritization dashboard that I have up right now, most likely, let's say you're prioritizing in just bridge and pavement. Maybe you belong to the bridge group or the pavement group. What we can do in DecisionLens is we can take that prioritization directly from the bridge group, and it would look like this in DecisionLens. These are all the bridge programs that were prioritized in a silo in their own program, and we're literally bringing that in and assessing it against all of the other goals and measures that that leadership has established. So DecisionLens enables you to focus in on a silo or to build up to a macro level view of what's happening across the system like this. And that's really the beauty of this type of system. It's not changing the way you do things, it's changing the way you tell the story of your data from disparate systems, disparate programs, and how those disparate systems and programs are building up to helping the state at large meet their targets.
Very interesting. Yeah, absolutely. This one's a bit of a two-part question. So after seeing the demo, how long does it take to implement the solution? And then once it's implemented, what types of support does an organization get, to obviously get the software up and running and be using it effectively?
That's a great question. The beauty of DecisionLens is that it is cloud-based, so getting you up and running, we can turn on an instance in a day, but it really takes about a good 6 to 8 weeks to really get a value model in place that includes the right criteria across the individual programs that are within the system, and really getting stakeholders together to weigh in on the relative weights of importance of these criteria, gather the data, and to link up to the data systems necessary to evaluate how each of these projects across various asset classes align to those goals and measures. So at the high end, I would definitely say 8 weeks. It really does vary for organizations based on size, based on how siloed an organization is. So I'm just going to go with the highest level right now, which is pretty much within a 6 to 8 week range.
Gotcha.
As far as support,
Yeah.
sorry, there was a two-part question. The software comes with an army of support. So the software comes with support from our customer success team. Each one of our clients has a strategic client manager that really manages their needs to make sure that they're getting value very quickly from the software. We have project managers that are specifically focused on transportation engineering and also working with mass transit agencies to really give you best practices on how to structure these types of decision portfolios, especially considering that the typical organization is siloed. So we totally understand that, and we're not trying to change the way you do things today. We're trying to make the data coming from the way you do things today more actionable, and we're trying to give you a way to create great narratives to communicate what's happening within your system more effectively.
Very well said. That looks to be all the questions that we got in from the chat. So, Naquan, I really, really appreciate the last hour. I think that was an amazing presentation, fantastic demo of our capabilities and solution, and yeah, I just really appreciate the time.
Thank you.